Before there was Frederick Douglass, before Ida B. Wells, before the Chicago Defender, two men decided Black Americans would no longer wait for permission to tell their own story. Their names were Samuel E. Cornish and John Brown Russwurm. In New York, in 1827, they started Freedom's Journal, the first African-American newspaper in the United States. This is the story of the people behind the institution. The two men who started America's first Black newspaper, the Black Press Archives, Episode 3. Samuel E. Cornish came to journalism through the ministry. The Library of Congress identifies him as a free African-American Presbyterian minister from Delaware. A Delaware Public Archives history places his ministerial training in Philadelphia and his work in New York, where he organized a Black Presbyterian congregation. That background matters because a church was more than a place of worship. For Cornish, ministry meant speaking, organizing, teaching, and serving a community. Those skills did not automatically make someone a newspaper editor, but they placed him inside the institutional life of Black New York. When Freedom's Journal began, Cornish became one of its editors. The Library of Congress record identifies him and Russwurm as the men who started the paper, supported by other leading free African-American men in the city. Cornish did not remain in the editorial office for the newspaper's entire run. The Library of Congress reports that he resigned after 6 months, explaining that he intended to devote himself to the ministry. He remained connected to the paper as a subscription agent. His departure should not erase his role at the beginning. Cornish helped turn the demand for Black public representation into an operating newspaper. John Brown Russwurm came to the newspaper through education and teaching. Bowdoin College records him as a member of the class of 1826 and the college's first African-American graduate. The college's archival guide says that after graduation, he taught at Primus Hall, a school for Black children in Boston. In 1827, Russwurm became junior editor of Freedom's Journal. That title is documented. It tells us his position. It does not give us permission to invent a private working relationship or assign every unsigned article to one editor. What the record does establish is that Russwurm brought advanced formal education, teaching experience, and editorial labor into the new paper. The Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery preserves an identified portrait of Russwurm. The object record also recognizes his Bowdoin education and his work as a co-founder of Freedom's Journal. Later, Russwurm became the paper's senior editor. His views on colonization changed, and in 1829 he migrated to Liberia. Those later decisions matter to his biography, but they do not need to be projected backward into imagined conversations at the founding. The reviewed sources establish a partnership. They do not document how Cornish and Russwurm first met. There is no verified scene in which one man walks into a room, approaches the other, and proposes a newspaper. There is no approved transcript of a private conversation between them. What survives is the institution they created together. The Library of Congress catalog credits Cornish and Russwurm with starting Freedom's Journal. The first issue places their names together as editors and proprietors. Other free Black leaders in New York supported the effort, so the responsible historical answer is precise. We know they collaborated. We know the newspaper appeared under their joint leadership. We do not know the circumstances of their first meeting from the sources reviewed for this episode. That limit is not a weakness. It is part of working honestly with evidence. Freedom's Journal published its first issue in New York on March 16, 1827. The Library of Congress describes it as the first African-American newspaper in the United States. Its catalog identifies it as a weekly publication. On the first page, the editors made their purpose unmistakable. We wish to plead our own cause. The words joined authorship to ownership. Black people would not appear only as subjects described by somebody else. Black editors would select material, address readers, and create a dated public record. The Library of Congress says the founders wanted to oppose misrepresentation of African Americans in white newspapers and literature. That description identifies the problem they sought to answer. It does not justify treating every white newspaper as identical. Freedom's Journal created a new institution through which Black writers and readers could enter public debate in their own names. Calling Freedom's Journal a symbol is not enough. It was a working newspaper. The paper had to appear on a schedule. Material had to be selected and arranged. Pages had to be printed. Copies had to reach readers. Subscriptions had to be collected. The Library of Congress record says Freedom's Journal had agents who gathered subscriptions across the Northeast, the South, Canada, England, and Haiti. That network shows that newspaper operations extended beyond the editorial room in New York. The paper carried news, abolitionist subjects, literature, editorials, and advertisements. A Library of Congress research guide notes its attention to slavery and colonization. We should not assign an unsigned item to Cornish or Russwurm without evidence. We should not fabricate a newsroom routine that the record does not preserve, but the surviving pages prove the central fact. Their idea became a publication that was printed, distributed, read, and preserved. The partnership changed within the first year. Cornish resigned from the editorial role after 6 months and returned his attention to ministry, although he continued as a subscription agent. Russwurm remained and later became senior editor. The newspaper also entered difficult debates over African colonization. The Library of Congress connects those debates to the end of Freedom's Journal in 1829 and to Russwurm's migration to Liberia. This episode does not reduce the founders to a simple story of agreement or conflict. Their partnership was historically important, even though it did not remain unchanged. Institutions are built by people, and people can share a project without sharing every later conclusion. Freedom's Journal lasted only 2 years, but short duration does not mean small importance. The Library of Congress places it near the beginning of a later tradition of Black-owned newspapers. That is a statement about historical tradition, not proof that every later editor followed a direct line from Cornish and Russwurm. Cornish returned to journalism after Freedom's Journal. Russwurm later edited a newspaper in Liberia. Their careers moved in different directions, but both continued working through institutions built around words, education, and public life. Their most durable shared achievement was the newspaper they began in 1827. History often remembers institutions, but institutions begin with people. Samuel Cornish and John Brown Russwurm proved that Black Americans could build their own newspaper, and in doing so, begin telling their own story. Cipherwithmalik.com, where knowledge lives. Peace.